This is Real Oregon Lifestyle with Andrea Fay and Jen Fiddler, two licensed real estate brokers who share their love of all things Oregon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Oregon Lifestyle. I'm Andrea Fay.
And I'm Jen Fiddler.
And today we've got a fun episode for you, and it's based on true stories. We both recently have had some experiences with sellers who have done their own remodeling projects, and they looked beautiful. They did a great job on them, only they didn't get permits.
Got to get a permit.
Yeah.
I've had this come up several times over the years. If you're thinking of remodeling and you're thinking about the future and sellability, get your electrical, get your plumbing permits. Those are the ones that always seem to bite us. And Andrea actually has a good recent story of this.
Yeah, it's a great story. The people, so these are really great people. They have done their own remodeling of their kitchen. It was like kind of closed off. It was a closed off, almost galley style kitchen that they were able to open up into the living room. And it turned out beautiful. They ended up turning the part where the wall would have been, they kind of turned it into a kitchen island with butcher block counters and installed some really cute pendant lights and can lights in the kitchen. And anyway, it was adorable what they did to it. The only kicker was they did not get permits. And now they're thinking about selling. However, now if we put it on the market, it's kind of like, okay, well, that kind of opens us up to some problems with selling. It opens them up to some vulnerability. And, you know, if we're doing our job right, we don't want to do that before we hit the market. So anyway, I had them call the city, city planning and development, and hypothetically say, okay, if we were to remodel our kitchen, this is what we're thinking of doing. We're not going to be changing the structure of the house so much, except for we're just going to be opening up that wall. We will need to move some electrical, and we're going to be adding some electrical. And with that said, the city was like, okay, well, it doesn't sound like you're moving walls. They don't like to hear if you're moving walls, then that might be a structural permit. But they said, yes, in this case, it sounds like you could have an electrical permit that is needed. And so having that information and having talked to someone, hypothetically, they figured out that, yes, indeed, they probably needed at least bare minimum electrical permits. And that also requires an inspector to come down and make sure they did everything right. So at least now they're getting that process started. You can do it retroactively. However, they don't like it when you do it retroactively. And occasionally, if something's not done right, they will need to open up a wall to make sure the wiring is correct.
Yeah, I fortunately have never had that, but I've heard of some crazy instances where inspectors have come back and had people open up walls and things like that to inspect. So yeah, anytime you're thinking about doing a major remodeling project, just err on the side of caution. Permits are honestly not that expensive. I think that's a little bit of a misnomer that's out there. Get your permits because it's worth it, and it could be more costly in the long run when you have to go back and get those permits retroactively.
Yeah. And, I think I'll tell another example of one that I came across, and this was a few years ago. And it was a listing that I had. And this one actually had a carport that was converted into a garage. And again, it was one of those things that I wouldn't have been able to tell that it was a carport at one point. And so I didn't think to research it or ask any questions. And lo and behold, the buyer's agent in that case looked up, all the work that had been done on the house and found that pretty much everything else on the house was permitted except for that garage conversion. And the bummer part about that was now the sellers were in a position where they were vulnerable, and the buyers knew it. And so they did their best to try and get some of those funds back in the form of repairs, or retroactively getting those permits. So the buyers were able to negotiate pretty well on that, and we were in a position timing wise that we didn't really have too much of a choice. So those are some of the consequences, is that in a repair negotiating situation, you could be vulnerable and have to pay maybe thousands of dollars more than it may even cost to get that permitting done.
Yeah, I've had instances too where not only does it affect the inspection, but it'll affect the appraisal. Several years ago, I was selling a house that was originally probably, we'll call it 900 square feet, and they had added on an additional 300 or 400 square feet. So when the appraiser came out, they were unable to find any permitting for that particular. I believe what they had done is added a sunroom, if I remember correctly. Doesn't matter. The point is the appraiser wouldn't count that square footage into the appraisal, and so it appraised low, and our deal ended up falling apart because of it. So it was kind of an unfortunate situation. The seller didn't want to go back and get a permit. The buyer was kind of scared off by that, because then she was like, well, what else did you guys do on this house that was unpermitted? And there wasn't anything, but, it ended up costing us all a deal. So when we were talking about the prep for this class, we were also talking about the tax consequences of that. And there are unintended tax consequences. And this is mostly maybe even as a buyer to know, even if a seller did get permitting, and let's say they significantly changed the house, significantly improved it, or added on to the square footage, when that property goes to sell, the county assessor can come out and say, we need to reassess the house. And that's what's called an exemption event. So at least up here in most of the counties, you can only have your property taxes be increased by 3%. In the case of an exemption event, they can be increased significantly more than that if there's been, again, huge property improvements, if there's been square footage added, lots of updates and remodeling, and if that house hasn't been assessed in a long time on sale, the buyers have to know that they could be stuck with a significantly higher tax rate than what the current owners are paying. So that's just something to look for mostly as a buyer when you're in that, especially, in this market, flips and remodeling, and those houses sell kind of fast and usually for top dollar. And that could put the affordability factor of, even if it's only $58 a month, like that could make a big difference to you in your payment.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, Zillow and Trulia and all those things, all those websites these days don't actually help the scenario, because we're in a situation where now tax assessors, all they have to do is go on Zillow and see those beautiful pictures of the house that was just purchased. And there is easy access to information now, including the assessors. They don't just, they can easily see that there's big changes in a certain property. And so that might be a red flag to them that they are maybe not taxing that property enough.
Sorry to jump in here. Quick editor's note. Holy crap. I never even realized that.
Mm-hmm. Once your information is out on the internet, it's out there for good. There's no taking it back. Those pictures are out there forever.
It doesn't just apply to those Cancun photos from 17 years ago.
Nope. I mean, that too.
So and I've actually sat through what it's called an omitted property exemption. I've sat through those classes before and have been told by people that were teaching the class that assessors will go and look at the RMLS or WVMLS, and they will look for those kind of sales so that they can come out and assess them. I see this on new construction as well. My own personal house several years ago, we built. The county assessor came knocking on my door to make sure that it was actually per plan, because they thought we had added a bonus room. We just had really tall vaulted ceilings in the entryway. That's our house in Albany, Andrea, you'll remember that. And they thought that we had done that with the intention of building a bonus room over the garage, and we didn't. And so they just were coming to knock on the door to check that. So it personally has happened to me, and they do check that stuff.
Yeah. And, just a side note also, I mean, taxes are something that definitely need to be paid attention to. Future taxes, for sure. And of course, we can't predict. We don't have a crystal ball, to know exactly how that's going to pan out. But it's obvious stuff though, that you should know, like there's a very possible change in taxes. For example, if someone was to buy new construction, usually the taxes on the house are based on the year prior when there was no house on the land. So that's just the land. Well, obviously those taxes are going to go up, and lenders know how to, how to calculate those escrow payments and what your payments are projected to be. But they can't exactly do that on an existing house that has all these changes. That's a little bit harder for them to wrap their heads around. And so it's going to be obvious information that you just might have to go, okay, this could happen on this house.
Yeah, I'll often just point that out when I've seen a house with a significant amount of remodeling. I'll just point that out to the buyers and point them to the assessor if they have any questions regarding that. But it is always a possibility. Definitely watch for it with add-ons. That's where I see the most problems.
Yeah, I think so too. What's interesting is, okay, since we're talking about remodeling, and there's a lot of people that are like, well, that's not fair. I still want to be able to remodel my house. Do I have to use a contractor? And the answer is, I think you can still get away with doing it yourself, so long as you are following the process of the city planning, whichever city jurisdiction that is, or county. Make sure you're just following their process to get the permits.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not that overwhelming, and it's not that hard. I've found most of the jurisdictions are pretty helpful with helping consumers getting permits, figuring out which ones they need. Also, for the most part, most of us shouldn't be doing our own electrical and plumbing anyway. Like at my house, we do a lot of remodeling, but it's stuff that we know we don't have to have permits for. If it's stuff that Grayson won't ever do electrical that's unpermitted or that needs to be permitted, it's your electrician will do that kind of stuff for you and get the proper permitting if they're doing it right.
I agree with that. And if it's like a expertise that you are not an expertise in, plumbing, electrical, those are kind of specialties. And I mean, people have whole careers on them. So, if you haven't been spending many, many days, hours, in that field, maybe you should hire a professional. Just a thought.
100%.
Mm-hmm. So out of curiosity, can I ask what kind of maybe the worst questionable additions you guys have seen in homes? I mean, I have one right off the bat. A friend of mine bought a house, and I honestly can't believe that this wasn't caught before, but they kind of had this, I don't know what you want to call it. It was like a knocked out kitchen. The kitchen sort of had, I'm not going to describe it the right way, but it had some angles to the walls. Like it almost seemed like somebody added, think about a breakfast nook, but larger than that. And there was kind of a sink inlaid into it and stuff like that. Well, at a certain point, it started dripping right at the seam where that knockout was during the rainy weather. And when they went to fix that, they realized that essentially what a person had done was just enclosed one of those metal stand-up little outdoor patio things. They had literally just thrown siding around that. It was not structural at all.
Wow. Did they have an inspector when they purchased this house?
I'm going to go ahead and guess not. It was during the housing boom, before the 2008 crash. And so everybody was just buying everything they possibly could. So I think things were just really slipping through the cracks back then.
I think that is very possible. What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, I think that there is some stuff that an inspector could maybe not catch, but I think in that case, an inspector would probably have some suspicion about that one. Yeah, that's probably one of the worst ones I've heard of. To be fair, knock on wood, I'm going to go ahead and knock on wood when I say this. I haven't had a lot of these situations over the years, maybe one or two where we've found that stuff was unpermitted, and mainly it came to square footage discrepancies. That was the biggest thing, for things, simple things. The sunroom is the most common one I see people enclose an outdoor area. It doesn't have electrical. It doesn't have even heat or anything on it. It's meant to be used in the summertime, but they count it in the square footage when it technically isn't supposed to be counted in the square footage. So that's the most common one that I see.
I see that one a lot too. In fact, we had one that was like that, a listing, and the same thing. The appraiser would not count that square footage, and partially because it's a lot of times it's not heated, and it needs to be a heated space to be able to be counted. And I think a lot of those sunrooms just they're not, they're not heated. I mean, you've got the sun doing that, so why would you pay to have that heat put in that room? But most of them are not.
Right. But if a sunroom is built like a patio and then you try to enclose that, then that's not part of the structure of the home. So it can't really count.
It can't. Even if the flooring is the same as inside the house, it doesn't necessarily make it part of the square footage. It has to be livable square footage.
I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. I was a little bit worried that was the situation with our front little entryway. It looks like an enclosed porch, but we had everything inspected. It's apparently built, even though it appears to be an addition to the house, or maybe it's not. I don't know. I mean, but looking at it from inside and outside, I was so sure that was just an enclosed little front patio. But again, we did our due diligence. We had it inspected, and it looks like it's part of the structure of the house. But there are certain things like that now, working with you, Andrea and Jen, I really am on the high alert for that stuff whenever I'm in a home that we're looking at.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how the more you start learning, then you start really just kind of going, you start looking at everything. And, we're not perfect too. That house that the first remodeling story I told with the kitchen remodel, they did such a great job on it that I didn't even think, it looked like a professional job. So it just didn't even cross my brain that could be something that we need to ask for. And of course, luckily I caught it later looking at paperwork and their seller property disclosures. But, so we're not in a vulnerable position. They have plenty of time. They're already going down to the city and getting their permits like, good boys and girls. So it's all fixable, but it's better to fix it before it hits the market.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that line she's referring to in the seller's property disclosure says, are there any additions, conversions, or remodeling? And oftentimes people think that what they're doing isn't necessarily considered a conversion or a remodel. I've even done that on my own houses when I've sold them. I'm like, well, let me think about it. What did we really do? Okay, yeah, I guess that's technically a remodel. Yeah, we put in new countertops and things like that. But I think it's better to over-disclose as a seller to not get yourself in trouble later.
Absolutely. And, I think when you're talking to planning and development, whichever city or county you're talking to, they're going to ask you things like, did you move any walls? Did you install a new wall? Did you take one out completely? Have you changed the structure of the house? There are certain questions they're going to ask you. But I think the one that sticks with me the most, and I've used this, time and time again, it's my number one question is, were any walls moved? And by moving walls, like, are you also moving plumbing? Are you moving electrical? With all those changes, it's not just moving a wall. There's things inside the wall. So, or are you adding plumbing? There's all kinds of stuff there that it's like, there's little red flags, but those are the main ones that I always think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we kind of beat that to death.
Yeah. So if anybody is thinking about getting, doing their remodels, don't hesitate to call down to city planning and hypothetically. So I say hypothetically, talk about the things you want to do, because it is possible to flag your own property. And you don't really want the assessor knocking on your door, finding out, trying to see if you actually did your remodeling project or not. It'd be better to not go down that road, but, ask those questions. Like, hypothetically, if I was going to change this, and, just don't give them your address and you'll be good. You can do that. And they take hypothetical questions all day long.
I love that.
So when you walk in and just say, hypothetically, if I was to allegedly do this, not on my house. No, this is a house that's in Mexico.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't even own it.
No, yeah. I mean, they're always super helpful for the most part and super nice down there. Don't be intimidated to talk to the city. And again, don't be intimidated by the fact that you may have to get a permit for something. It's really not that expensive. I had just had to have an electrical panel replaced in one of my listings. I can't remember what the permit is, but if it was $200, I'd be surprised on a $2,500 electrical panel replacement. So, you know, again, it's not that expensive. It's worth it. Stuff like that you want to have the documentation for. So now that we've thoroughly scared you guys about the implication of taxes, the city coming after you, we promise we'll have a more uplifting and exciting episode next time.
Yeah, and let's just let everyone know also that the city planning, they're usually very nice and they want to work with you. So don't be intimidated. It's okay. It's all going to be okay. All right. Well, I think you're right. We did beat that horse. And that's about all we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And you can find us on Instagram at Real Oregon Lifestyle. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and realoregonlifestyle.com. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.